Welcome to a couple of bunkies.
We recently received a commission for making some boxes. These are small jewelry boxes about 9 inches long and 6 inches wide.
These boxes will be made out of walnut, curly maple, red oak, cucumber, magnolia, and sassafras. The commissioner wanted me to copy a couple of boxes that he already had. These boxes needed to have a smaller box that was able to slide back and forth in the inside of it. So I went ahead and went to the computer to kind of design the box. The most important part of this box would be the feet, the rabbet, and the groove for the bottom of the box to sit in. We also made rough dimensions for the inner boxes.
Majority of these boards were rough cut, so they had to go through a planer. While planing a rough cut lumber, we have to always make sure that at least one face of the board is flat.
This is really necessary when taking it to the joiner. This allows me to put the flat face of the board on the fence of the joiner. By having a straight reference point like that, it allows me to get every other edge straight.
This was our first project with our saw stop and we were excited to use it. After referencing the design that we had made earlier, Tim went ahead and cut all the long boards into roughly the right size.
I tried to have at least one board at least 9 inches, a little over maybe, and the other boards around 6 inches, and have the depth for around 3 inches. I really enjoyed how the saw stop worked. I was not impressed with the dust collecting system.
After that, Tim goes ahead and tilts the blade of the saw to a 45-degree angle to cut boards to make a mitered butt joint. He did that on all 4 sides of each box. We went ahead and resawed some of the thicker pieces for bottoms as well as the smaller boxes that were going to fit inside of the bigger box.
Now with the table saw, I went ahead and cut the groove in which the bottom portion of the box would sit in. This makes a strong joint and a better glue up.
Now it's time to cut the bottom of the boxes to the dimensions. A dry fit at this stage is important to make sure that the bottom fits snugly into the grooves and the box can be closed on all 4 sides. Excess material can be cut away, but if the bottom is shorter, then it will not fit properly in the box.
I also used the dry fit box in order to set my table fence so I can go ahead and cut the top of the box. After getting the lid squared, I go ahead and use the table saw in order to make the rabbets. These rabbets will allow a smaller box to sit inside of the larger box.
Next step is to measure the inner dimensions of this box to be able to cut the smaller box. Again, a quick dry fit will ensure that everything will come together properly.
And then a beautiful bunkie came down the shop and congratulated me on the good work. And then I went ahead and continued making boxes. And I go ahead and finish up the second box fairly easily.
I hope all of you are subscribed and all of you have watched our previous video where we unboxed and installed a laser engraver. We decided to put this laser engraver to use to engrave something on these boxes, especially our logo at the bottom of each box.
And next we go into the process of gluing up the boxes.
We taped 3 sides of the box, then applied generous amount of glue to the miter joints and to the groove. Slid in the bottom in the groove, closed the box and glued the 4th side, and taped the rest of the box together.
We used a very similar process when dealing with the smaller boxes. Only difference was that most of the smaller boxes I used butt joints to hold everything together. And we repeated this process for all the boxes. Now I go ahead and round over the top edges of the lids. I went ahead and set my table saw fence to around 2 inches. Then I went ahead and angled my blade to around 35 degrees, and then I started making the cuts in order to make the legs for these boxes. And since I don't have the dado set up for this table saw, I went ahead and took multiple passes in order to complete the legs. These boxes really turned out pretty right now, but I just wanted to add a little bit more. I went ahead and started making a spline jig in order to give some contrasting color to the box. I went ahead and I picked up some scrap plywood and an old jig that I had laying around in order to utilize it to make this project. I went ahead and carefully measured my fence and cut the plywood to fit around the fence. I went ahead and used CA glue and a brad nailer in order to connect the jig together. I took the leftover piece of plywood and attached it to the side of the jig. I went ahead and tore off pieces of an older jig that I had and used it for making a 45-degree guide for setting 90-degree angles. And now I'm ready to use my spline jig.
Spline joint will also add a little more stability to the entire box. Tim took several passes with the spline jig so he can fit a nice thick piece of walnut in the spline. He cut the spline flush to the box with a Japanese saw. Then, with a belt sander, he sanded everything smooth.
Next, on the lid of several boxes, I went ahead and made an X in the center. I centered the project with the center function of the laser. Then I went ahead and let the laser engraver cut a custom design on the box. I went ahead and added Tung Oil to all of the boxes. It really made the wood grain pop out. The oil is safe to handle and I absolutely loved working with it. Aditi had pre-cut some velvet strips to put inside of the boxes.
We decided to put walnut splines in lighter color boxes, and boy, they turned out pretty. Also, we made some variation in the feet. We decided to put maple spline in walnut and red oak box to give it a little bit of a contrast, and that looks very pretty. These boxes sure turned out really beautiful. It was very hard to give them to the commissioner.
After adding the tung oil to the boxes, it was time to go ahead and put on the box hardware. We ended up getting the box hardware from Amazon. And here are the finished pieces. Box hardware, the velvet insides, and all. Boy, don't they look beautiful. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe.
Please check out our social media pages. The link is in the description below. Also, don't forget to visit our Etsy store and our eBay store. We still have lots of canes available on our eBay store.
And a limited supply of these beautiful boxes will be up for sale on the Etsy store. And all of the boxes can be custom engraved to your specification. If you like our content, you can support us with our Patreon page. It is in the link in the description below.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed making of these beautiful boxes.